Elise, thank you so much for coming. So one thing that I'll say from the very beginning as we start here is that I'm very impressed that you reached out to me to ask if you could be on the podcast. And this was in relation to our mutual friend, Caddy. You listened to that episode and you reached out to me and said, hey, can I be on the podcast? And I was like, heck yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Pete. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm excited to speak, and I think reaching out to you was the right thing to do because I always wanted to get my voice out there, and I feel like this is one of the first and best steps to do it. So,
yeah, another thing I wanted to mention straight off from the beginning is just a little bit about you and your age. You are, how old are you?
I am currently 15 years old.
15 years old, and you're coming out, you're willing to use your voice to kind of speak to some of the things that we're going to talk about today that are important to you, things that you think are important for other people to hear as well.
Yeah, I've always been someone who has wanted to educate the people about things that are ignored and neglected. And I feel as if that ignorance does breed fear. And ignorance is something that torments the world each day. And taking the steps to try to end it is one of the best things that each person can do.
I couldn't agree more. I myself, as I've gone throughout my life, obviously I'm a bit older than you, getting education is the best way to just figure out what life's all about, to figure out who people are and to connect with people, right?
Yeah.
So tell me some of the, you're only 15, so why has this been on your mind so much?
I feel like it's been on my mind considering the fact that I am a Black woman in America and I am the child of immigrants. So the issues in the world, specifically regarding race, have been glued on me since I was a child and since I was born.
Okay. I don't want to keep this super general, but I want you to say more about that because people can't see us, but people that know me and know that I'm doing this podcast know me as a middle-aged white guy. So I don't know that experience. So can you say more about maybe what that experience has been like and maybe some specifics about Utah, Salt Lake City, what it's been like to have that experience here?
In Salt Lake City, being a Black girl has been really hard, and I'm very glad that I've been able to become more confident in myself because when I was younger, I was someone who was very shy. I was someone who was embarrassed of my culture, someone who was almost ashamed of my skin color because of the beauty standard within society, but specifically in Utah, which is not a very diverse place compared to other cities in the world and other states in this country. So having the beauty standard of a white girl with blue eyes, it does hurt your self-esteem. And I've been able to overcome that, and I'm able to present myself to the world and share my culture with the world.
I love that. And I'm curious, at what age did you kind of start recognizing and noticing these things?
I would say in second grade, because I wore my afro to school and a girl began to throw pencils in my hair trying to see if they would stick in throughout the day. So I'm someone who has very curly hair while this girl had blonde straight hair, and it just hurts your feelings knowing that she wouldn't do that to someone else based on their hair type. And that's when I realized that that'll probably be how the rest of my life might be if I stay in Utah and just in general being in America.
Yeah, that's a really traumatic thing to experience as a young person in second grade, to have to kind of navigate that at that level. That must have been really challenging.
It was really difficult, and considering the fact that I was a really shy child, I never really told my parents about it or even told my teachers about it who watched as this happened. And I'm pretty sure my teacher knew what was happening but didn't say anything because we were children, so she probably thought that the girl was just playing around with me when it actually hurt my confidence and hurt my self-esteem.
Right, and there was that connection to the way that you looked. You know, you mentioned Afro, and that's all kind of interconnected, and that's probably something that a lot of people don't realize. And I don't want to plead ignorance for everybody, but I think part of this, conversation, obviously we'll get more into it as we go, is this education piece. So, this other young girl that you're with in the class treats you that way. You notice that the teacher is noticing, and the teacher is not intervening either. Yeah, that sounds like a really challenging, difficult situation to deal with as a 7 or 8 year old.
I definitely say it was, and it has been. And it's always happened. Like, afterwards, I switched schools and discontinued at my other school, where people would make comments about my hair, and people would come up to me speaking various African languages when the only other language I speak other than English is French. So I felt targeted at times, but over time I did find that confidence, and I did find my voice to call people out and correct them.
And I'm curious how that goes for you, because I think we do need correction. I've been corrected by people on how I approach certain situations, and I appreciate it. I always, of course, appreciate it when that's done with a little bit of sensitivity, because I don't feel like I've ever tried to do anything malicious towards anybody else. But it is sort of like, okay, I'm learning and trying to navigate how to say these things. So if you were using your own words and your own experiences, how would you verbalize how you can help somebody else out realize their actions are hurting you or hurting somebody else?
I think the best way is definitely to think about the approach and think about the person you're talking to. And I believe coming towards in a caring nature is the best way to do so, because if you come towards someone trying to correct them in a manner that they might feel is claiming them to be problematic, they will shy away and they won't want to address the problem because they'll feel too bad to actually address it. So I feel like taking the steps and telling them, hey, this is what you did and this is why it's wrong and this is how you can correct it, is the best way to approach that.
Do you ever use, like, I come from a mental health background, and before we started recording, we talked a little bit about the mental health aspect of all of this. Do you ever kind of incorporate your feelings in how you're explaining that to a person? Like, this is how that hurts my feelings, or this is how it affects my confidence, my self-esteem?
I definitely do, because the best way to help people understand is giving them real life examples, especially if you're close to that person and they hurt you. Giving them the feeling of what you felt makes them feel actually sorry for what they did.
Right, yeah. It personalizes it, right? It helps us to realize that, okay, Elise, that I've just said something, I've just offended her by something I've said. You're a person too. You have feelings, and we need to realize that. And we need to be a little bit more, probably a lot more sensitive to each other's feelings and how we approach certain situations in everyday life. Because like you are explaining, like, as a child growing up in Utah, where you were felt as a minority, are a minority, still after all these years living in Utah, we're still a very white state, right? Yeah. So you probably experience this all the time, and having to navigate it has got to be exhausting and very challenging.
I mean, it is very exhausting at times, but I know that it'll benefit them, myself, and the world. So you just have to keep going, even though sometimes you do want to stop. And sometimes it shouldn't be my responsibility to call them out, because they do have the resources like the internet, which is very accessible to be able to educate themselves. But in that moment, if you do see someone doing something wrong, I feel like it is best to just call them out in that moment.
And I imagine you've had to do this in all areas of life, not just school, just everyday sort of life and all things you're participating in, right? Yeah, definitely. Like, as a child, you're told by, like, people who see you because I am a dark skin,
So people come up to you and say that you are pretty for a dark-skinned girl. And it's just like one of those things where it's like, if it's like in public and right there, like if you're like in the middle of Walmart and someone says that to you, you don't really know what to do because you're just like in the middle of Walmart and you just want to get your groceries done and go home.
Yeah.
So in times like that, I just continue going.
Sure.
But it's just sometimes it's an everyday occurrence and you just got to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, oh man, you saw my facial reaction when you said that. Like, that sort of stuff is just like, on one hand, it's wild for me to hear, but on the other hand, like, I absolutely know that exists and that happens, and it's a weird it's a weird thing. I mean, I can't explain it, and you can't explain it either, obviously, but you're the one that has to deal with it, obviously, as you're explaining. So just kind of to go back a little bit, you mentioned a little bit earlier that you said I shouldn't have to kind of take on the burden of correcting or explaining this all the time. You know, there's a great tool out there, the internet, for people to kind of go get a little bit more educated. Do you have any kind of recommendations or suggestions for people on how to do that? What would be a best way to kind of do that so there's not pressure on individuals like yourself to have to correct the rest of us?
I mean, I would just say search up like the situation and say like how you could maybe Google search, I believe, like just how to be more sensitive in the way that you approach yourself. I mean, not sensitive in a bad way, because sensitive can come across as a bad thing. But being sensitive and coming with a sensitive approach can allow yourself to not offend others and engage in microaggressions.
And I think a lot of people will hear this word microaggressions and not really understand what that means. How would you explain microaggressions?
I would say a microaggression is when you hurt someone with words based on maybe their appearance or background when it wasn't necessarily intentional. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to explain it. How I like this approach of like, okay, take some time on the internet to maybe research some of these things, maybe start by doing a little bit more research on microaggressions and what they are and get educated. In terms of daily practice, I'm kind of trying to use you as a soundboard, because like if I'm approaching this as a person that doesn't have any knowledge or is trying to be a little bit more sensitive, a daily practice might be just like approaching a situation that you're not familiar with an individual or their background and just trying to not make any assumptions about who they are, what they stand for based upon the way they look.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, this is like a cheesy quote, but like, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
When you approach someone, don't judge them immediately and base a conversation off of that.
Right.
Try to actually learn about the person, and if you don't want to, then you don't have to talk to that person and you don't have to approach them.
Yeah. I really like that. And I'm, again, trying to think from my frame of reference and from my experience, and I can go back in times in my life where I certainly have judged a book by its cover. I certainly have approached somebody by, knowing the language that they're speaking or knowing a little bit about their background and assuming a lot because of that. And so even if we take it from like a blank slate or don't judge a book by its cover, even if you do know a little bit about what's inside that book, I think there is even this like, don't make assumptions after that. So like, what maybe an example of what I mean, if I know somebody is from Congo, Central Africa, I can assume that they speak a certain language and have a certain religion or dress a certain way because I hear that they're from that country. But that's absolutely not the case, right?
I mean, you can definitely assume those things, and it necessarily isn't always bad, but don't act in a way towards them negatively based on those assumptions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that. So maybe if you are going to approach with some assumptions. Maybe it's a process of just like we're doing right now, getting to know each other, trying to figure out what you're all about, what I'm all about, rather than like going back to what you said about like people that have said to you, you're beautiful for a dark-skinned person, or I can't remember how you phrase it. Like that's like a really weird way to approach getting to know each other in a relationship.
Like, if you would like to compliment me, just say you're pretty.
Yeah.
Don't add the second part.
Yeah.
It's not needed.
For sure. Yeah. I'm wondering if we could, take a couple steps backwards. Again, before we started recording, you had kind of mentioned that you're first generation Utahn. I don't know, would you consider yourself a first generation Utahn American, all of it together?
I'd say all of the above.
Okay. And so when you say first generation, you're saying that your parents came here as immigrants. I'm wondering if they have shared with you kind of their experiences coming to Utah, the United States, as immigrants, and some of the challenges they faced.
Well, I know from my dad, because my dad, he tells me story times all the time. And he just says coming to Utah was a very rough thing. People refused to like give him rides, or like people at libraries would not help him with the computer when he struggled with it, because he came in, I believe, the early 90s.
Okay.
And tech at the time, it was very brand new, and coming from a country that didn't have that, it was challenging. And when he wanted to accept the challenge and he needed help with it, people refused to help him because he had a thick accent and he didn't know English very well as he does now.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of similar experiences from other people I've met of like just this reluctance for us as Utah community members to be able to be a little bit more open and willing to help, and not basing any of our judgment on the way somebody looks or their accent or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely, because things like that, you should, like, back to the don't judge a book by its cover thing. My dad, I would like to say that he's a very intelligent person, and he picks up things very quickly. So if someone were to able to just take the time with him when he needed help, learning how to navigate a computer when he first came here, maybe he would have been even further than where he is now if people actually just took the time to get to know him instead of judging him because he had like an accent.
Absolutely. And this is part of the reason why I want to have these sort of conversations, is so that people can hear this. People are probably understanding and knowing that people are moving to Utah, becoming first-generation Americans, and they're really probably wanting to help, but they're nervous and not knowing how to approach it. And so to be able to hear stories like this, to hear situations like this, I hope it kind of brings this normalization of like, these are just people too. They just want some help and some friendship, and they want to become a part of the community. And the faster that we can do that, I think it's the better for everybody, right?
It is better, because when Utah becomes more diverse, it helps people learn about things that they've never been exposed to. It helps people try new things that they've never been exposed to, like new foods, new songs, new dances. And it helps Utah become, I'd say, a more beautiful place.
I couldn't agree more, and that's been my experience. I really like the words that you used, exposure, to be exposed to these things and to recognize the beauty in all these things. I think exposure is such a huge thing. Like if we spend our time isolating ourselves or not wanting or willing to get involved in something new or different or meet somebody different than ourselves, we're never going to have exposure.
Yeah, because I feel like with even people I've met now who do live in a more diverse Utah, they're still reluctant to pop their bubble. And I've had to like push people out of it and like pop that bubble in order for them to shy away from their ignorance. And they've learned new songs and new dances from me, and I feel like they are grateful for that, and it does benefit them.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do you have any like experiences of that come to mind, of you helping to push somebody out of their comfort bubble?
I would say I have a friend, and she's someone who really enjoys dancing.
Okay.
And I don't think she necessarily didn't like African music, but she was reluctant to like listen to it and like take it seriously. So once I was able to show her Afro beats, which is a genre of music of, I'd say almost like pop music,
Okay.
with like an African structure behind it, she was able to create songs to that and move in different ways that she's never tried before.
Ah, that's awesome. Look, I actually want to take a quick tangent for African music because I've really been enjoying and listening to it a lot
As
lately.
you should.
So I want to hear what are your favorite artists lately that you've been listening to a lot. I mean, we're at the end of the year, so anybody that uses Spotify is getting this your year's wrapped. Here's your top artist for this year. So what's your top artist?
My top artist in Afro beats, I would say definitely Davido,
Okay.
Burna Boy,
Okay.
Tiwa Savage, who else? And Rima. I absolutely love African music. It helps me go back to my roots, and it's always just a good time, and it's just always fun to hear and listen to.
Yeah. So I'll be fully transparent. The only one I've heard of is Burna Boy, but I really like Burna Boy. Like, I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. It's good. And I've been listening to a little bit more. I don't know if you've gone down this genre. I've been listening to some of the folks that migrated from different African countries to the UK and now are bigger UK artists. So Bugsy Malone, or what are some other ones? I'm gonna have to pick up my phone and look, but they talk a lot about their African roots and then their migration to the United Kingdom and about their experience, and they incorporate that a lot into their art, which I really like and connect to because I'm trying to provide a little bit of space and working with folks that are coming to the United States as immigrants as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad that Afrobeats is getting more and more recognition, especially in the United States and the United Kingdom, because it's just always fun to see like your favorite artist from since you were a child who represents your culture being able to be seen by the world at like different TV award shows and music award shows.
For sure. So if you were to give us all some recommendations on getting more introduced to the Afrobeats genre, those artists that you mentioned, anybody else that you can think of that you would mention?
If you were to listen to one Afrobeats artist or group, you have to start with P Square.
Okay.
Because P Square, it's a vibe. Like, I don't know what else I can say. It is a cult classic in Africa and throughout Africa, and P Square is almost like a backbone for the entire continent.
Okay. Is that just the letter P and then the word square?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So the other artist I was trying to think of is Stormzy. I don't know if you've heard of Stormzy.
I know Stormzy.
Okay. So, yeah. So, like, some of that stuff I really enjoy. That probably is not considered Afro beats. Is that a separate genre that's more hip-hop rap?
I'd say so.
Okay. So I need to venture a little bit more into Afro beats. I like this. I'm going to go listen to P Square.
I'm glad you are.
Yeah. And as you have tried to introduce friends to this, are they getting more and more open and they grasping this, or is it still kind of a little bit of a struggle?
I think so, especially the fact that a lot of me and my friends, we are now older.
Okay.
So we're like not reluctant to try new things as we were when we were like 11 or 12.
Uh-huh.
So now I have hooked some of my friends. I have put on some of my friends onto new music constantly, and I'm really glad I am, because now we can listen to P Square together.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Is any of this making it into more of the mainstream American Billboard charts, or?
I would definitely say Davido, especially. He's really been popular now in America, I'd say more than ever, and I've believe that he's one of like the most recognized, along with Burna Boy, Afrobeats artists in the United States and in the United Kingdom.
Okay, yeah, because like I said, I'd heard of Burna Boy. I haven't heard of Davido.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, I'd like to think I'm trying to keep up with what's up and coming in music, but of course the younger generation, you guys are all about that and listening to that all the time. So that's cool. I love to hear that. Any other like music thoughts or anything that you want to share? Because music is another passion of mine, and it seems like you're really into music as well. So I want to hear more thoughts on music.
I think definitely exposing yourself to new music is always beneficial because music is a universal language. And even if you don't understand the language being spoken in a song, you can always just vibe with it. And it's always a great way to learn about new cultures and new people.
You mentioned the dance aspect that's tied to music, obviously, and teaching some of your friends dance. Would you consider this a part of something that your family, your parents have kind of taught you these different dance styles, and it's now a part of you and you want to share that? Or how would you categorize the dance aspect of it?
I mean, I can't really dance, but like I really try my best. So, but exposing my friends to it, I mean, some of them, they can move better than me now, and I'm kind of jealous considering the fact that I was the one who put them on it in the first place. Uh-huh. But I feel like dance and music, they go hand in hand in being universal languages. And it's always, like I said before, it's always just a great way to like learn about yourself and learn about what you like and learn about what cultures you would like to learn more about. And
this all gets tied into TikTok these days, or not so much for you?
I mean, there's like a whine challenge, and whining is like the movement of the hips in a circular movement.
Okay.
And there's a whining challenge on TikTok right now. I don't know how to dance, so I can't do it, but it is really fun to see it.
Yeah, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole of TikTok in terms of downloading the app myself, because I know for me it would just waste a lot of more of my time probably. But of course I get sent TikToks a decent amount, and a lot of them, have to deal with like dancing or a dance challenge, or can you do this next dance move sort of thing. So I'm just kind of curious if that's kind of the thing maybe with your group of friends, is that like we're going to incorporate this into TikTok and put it on TikTok, or maybe not so much.
I don't really post on TikTok. I'm private on my social medias, but I might have to start posting African dances with them on TikTok.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, that seems like it could be fun. So yeah, I mentioned that was a little bit of a tangent, the music tangent, but I want to come back to some of these themes about first generation Utahn American, helping others to kind of get some education that, maybe like myself, I grew up here in Utah. I've never, I have lived in the UK for a little bit, but never really experienced anything outside of living here in Utah. So to have others come in and help me to understand and be more accepting is super important. I'm wondering, maybe focusing a little bit more on this mental health part that you mentioned. How has the mental health been tied into all this whole experience for you?
Well, being a first-generation child of immigrants, mental health is definitely seen as a taboo in my culture, and mental health is not typically taken seriously. It's seen as it's very seen negatively, like it's depicted negatively. When you talk about it, it's like shut down. And I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just the way a lot of Africans are raised and the stigma around it in our overall culture.
So at the end of that, I don't mean to kind of pick apart words, but at the end of that, you said kind of connecting this to African culture. Can you say more about that? Because I'm interested in the different stigma, because there's certainly a mental health stigma in American culture as well. We're also kind of like, let's not talk about it. Oh, no, I'm not depressed. No, I don't get anxious. No, there's not a thing. Let's not talk about it. So can you maybe say a little bit more about what those perspectives are from your culture?
Yeah. In Africa and in African culture, we joke around a lot. That's just the way we are. Like, if people fall, we laugh.
Sure, yeah.
So when you tell people about mental health, it's seen as like a joke. If you reach out to someone about it, they'll like make jokes about it afterwards and like say, oh, like there's a demon in you, stuff like that, to just either laugh at it or just invalidate you.
I have heard this connection to kind of like demon and even voodoo. So does that come from a somewhat more serious historical context as well? Like in Africa, I don't know if you know. I'm just curious. Does this come from like well, actually, there is a demon in you, so we actually do need to perform ceremony and ritual so that you no longer have this mental health challenge?
Based on like stories of people I know, it depends on the way they're raised religiously.
Okay.
Because heavily religious Africans will take it seriously and negate the joke side of it.
Okay.
And attempt to prey on people, splash holy water on people, put olive oil on people to get these like quote unquote demons out. And people who aren't very religious will use the demon reference or the evil spirit reference as a joke.
Okay. And so I think in American culture, in my experience, there's often jokes about mental health as well and we, freely use this word crazy, like, oh, it's just crazy, when we need to be a little bit more sensitive about what's going on for that person. How have you been able to bridge some of the sensitivity and bring that into some of the cultural aspects that you talked about?
I think definitely with my parents, just having them listen is the best thing.
Okay.
Because listening will always just expose you to what you need to hear. And if and when they go sideways of it to turn it into like a joke or a lecture, you just always have to reel them back in and make sure that they know it's a serious conversation and that it needs to be taken with seriousness.
I like that. And I think that's a very courageous and bold thing for you to do. As, a child, you're, respecting your parents, but at the same time you're wanting them to acknowledge the seriousness of the conversation that you want to have with them. Do you do that with friends and peers as well?
I feel like with friends and peers, especially children of immigrants, it's easier to talk about mental health, and we don't take it as a joke, and we take it with seriousness because we all know that we can't necessarily always go to our parents about it, so we use each other as support.
What other places or people, like where else have you found support about mental health?
I would say some of my teachers, they're just really great people and they help me. Like my history teacher currently, I always know that I can go to him if I ever have a problem with mental health, if I ever just need a break from the class, and he'll understand it. And I believe that's because he's like a young person. He is around in his 20s.
Okay.
So he understands that stigma needs to be broken compared to older generations.
And there's probably a little bit more of a ease and connection with when there's not such a big age gap as well, right? If you're able to approach somebody that you feel understands you and your generation and what you're going through. Why do you think that this is a generational thing as well? Because I think there's something that has to do with an older generation versus the younger generation. Older generation is definitely like deny. Well, I don't have no mental health problems. Younger generation, we're kind of coming around to being like, let's talk about it.
I think the difference is social media.
Okay.
Because on social media, you're able to share your stories easily and hear other stories easily. And compared to older generations who didn't have that instant connection of people all over the world to hear about different stories, it may just shut them down because they didn't have that personal connection with other people to hear about these stories.
I agree, but I also want to point out the irony in that a little bit. And the irony for me is that I think that social media is also creating a lot of mental health problems, right?
I would say definitely.
And a lot to some of these things that you mentioned earlier about appearance and beauty and all the standards that get pushed out are probably really being pushed out on social media, whether it's a direct push or maybe a indirect push. Like nobody's like saying that you need to be beautiful in this sort of standard, but we're putting out videos and things and tutorials that is saying that you need to, if that makes sense.
I feel like social media in itself is very ironic because you have parts of it that are always talking about mental health, and then you have the side that destroys people's confidence at the same time. So I feel like it's just finding your place on social media. When you see posts that create negativity and that create issues within yourself, just always remove that content. Always click not interested, because you don't need that energy in your life if it's not beneficial towards you. And keep liking and keep saving the things on social media that are beneficial and that do help you, because at the end of the day, social media, it's very in your control, and it's up to you to really have that self-control to be able to ignore the negative aspects of it and push not interested when you know that it's going to create insecurities within yourself.
Well said. If I thought it was appropriate to give a round of applause in a podcast, I'd give you a round of applause. That was very well said.
Thank you.
Elise, where did you learn that? Where does that come from?
I think it's just with like my own experience, because recently when I see things that like create insecurities within me, I'll look at it, I'll just stare deep at it, and when I start thinking negatively, I just click like not interested immediately. So I think I started doing it in around, I'd definitely say quarantine was I wouldn't say I'm grateful for COVID, because I'm definitely not grateful for it.
Yeah.
But it did help me grow in who I am, and it allowed me to realize that I am worthy of good energy. I am worthy of not believing that I am, I wouldn't say ugly compared to like the beauty standard, but definitely that at the same time. So that's how I learned, and creating self-love during that time was essential, because you only had yourself and the people that you lived with during quarantine.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that says a lot about you and your personality and your drive, because I think I've noticed that during quarantine and during COVID, unfortunately, it has pushed people one way or another, meaning that like you're going to push further into these mental health challenges because they're isolated and alone and depressed because of quarantine, or like, I'm going to really face this right now. Like I have to face this. I have to understand more about me. I have to learn how to love me. I have to learn how to love those I'm closest with, because that's all I got right now.
I definitely say that quarantine, like you said, you could have gone one way or the complete other. And I really am glad that I chose the way that is beneficial to me, because my life would probably be completely different right now. And I am glad that I was able to gain that confidence and gain that self-love, because everyone deserves it at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it all starts with loving yourself. And I think people can catch that vibe pretty quickly. Like if they know that you love yourself and you're okay with yourself, then they're probably going to be quicker to accept you for who you are too, yeah?
I would say so, because changing yourself for other people, at the end of the day, that person might leave your life and you've just changed yourself for no reason. So you have to stick to yourself. You have to stick to your beliefs and your morals, because at the end of the day, it's you, and nobody should be able to alter that.
Yeah. I'm smiling as you say this, because it resonates with me, and I'm really happy to hear that you're figuring these things out at such a young age, because I'm going to be honest with you, I probably didn't figure these things out until my mid-20s, late 20s. I was like I got to be my own person. I got to love myself for who I am. I just got to reach this acceptance of who I am, and not worry about what other people think about me, or not worry about trying to adjust who I am to fit into that friend group or to become a better friend with that, because at the end of the day, it's not sustainable to be somebody else, right? You can only be yourself.
Yeah. I would definitely say, if you do struggle with yourself, if you do struggle with self-love, always just remember that at the end of the day, this sounds so narcissistic, but you matter, and the only thing that matters at the end of the day sometimes is yourself, because you really do only have yourself in those rough times. And if you don't believe in yourself, then you're not gonna have a good time overall in life.
there's this line between narcissism and self-love, right? So I think what you're describing is like this appropriate self-love. I think narcissism is when you go beyond that and you're like, you're the only person that matters. Like,
Yeah.
who's parked in my parking spot, or like, you know, like you make me dinner, like, you know, like that sort of thing. Like, I'm the most important person in the world in the room at all times, versus like, I need to love myself and take care of myself and kind of be a little bit more upfront about who I am and my place in the world, and find out what that is for myself.
I would also say that growing up in Utah as a Black girl, those experiences that harmed me ended up benefiting me. Because when I reflect back on them, I think in the future, I can avoid this and I can correct people on what they've done and what harm they've caused, and think about how I deserve that, calling them out. I deserve to call them out. And I deserve to realize that that situation was not okay. That situation wasn't okay regardless if the girl was 8 or not throwing pencils in my hair, because no one deserves that and everyone deserves to be respected. And I feel like respect is something that a lot of people lack for themselves and a lot of people lack for other people.
Again, very well said. I couldn't say it better. I'm curious to hear about how people have reacted as you have, as you said, called them out about the way that they've treated you, or things that they've done or said to you.
I would definitely say the reactions vary. I mean, for example, I called someone out today, at school.
Okay.
So when I called them out, I think they seemed bad, and that wasn't my goal necessarily. But my goal was just to overall educate them and tell them that what they said wasn't okay, and especially in the environment that they were in. And I think they took it and were able to sit on it afterwards and realize in the future to not repeat their actions. However, in other times, I faced... well, a little story time, but one time I called out someone for saying the N-word, and their cousin, who I was friends with, ended up calling me a monkey.
Oh, wow. All because you stood up and said, this is a very racist word. We shouldn't use this word. You shouldn't use this word. You should be held responsible for using this word. That's really astounding. Like, I can't believe that somebody would try to take it to another level after you're just trying to correct a very bad behavior.
I mean, at times it was upsetting, but when I look at it now, I just laugh because it's just so, to me, it's silly. If you were to get called out, the best way to approach it is just taking it, moving on, and correcting yourself rather than lashing out in anger, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to benefit you and I'm trying to better you, because if you said that around the wrong group of people, that could have ended very poorly.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's certainly one way to look at it, but I think the other way to look at it is it tells you more about that person. You now have a better idea about that person's personality on the way that they react to that, right? Like, if they're going to double down and then use another word that is obviously inappropriate in the situation, or their friend group is going to use another word to try to defend that person, you now know a little bit more about those people and where to invest your time and your friendship. Hopefully they get the education that they need to make those changes. But my experience has been that often when people react that way, they're kind of just reluctant to change. They're just like, I'm not ready to, you called me out. Yeah, I know I'm wrong, but I'm not going to change because there's this arrogance about it, or I don't know exactly.
Yeah, accountability is a thing that many people are reluctant to take on, and I feel like accountability is something that people should value, because with accountability comes bettering yourself. With accountability comes bettering the world. And when you're able to hold someone accountable and when you're able to hold yourself accountable, just think about all the good it will do. Think about how much better the situation will become.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like, accountability is something that, for one reason or another, I've been able to have in my life, and I preach that with people I work with, and I preach that just to myself. Like, you got to be accountable. If you're not accountable to yourself, and if you're in a team situation, a classroom situation, a work situation, if you're not accountable to others around you, then, you know, like, what's going on? This is how life should be. I mean, that's my perspective.
I feel like a lot of people, they think that they're going to be seen as the bad guy for taking accountability, when in reality, I think people would value them more so and respect them even more, because taking accountability can be hard, but once you do it, people will be able to realize that you are someone who can change and someone who is approachable.
Yeah. So I'm going to move this mic a little bit closer to you, but I just wanted to say, along with that, my experience, and I've had to go through a transition on, like, learning myself on how to be accountable. So my experience is that every time I've been accountable, and the accountability of, like, hey, I messed up, I made a mistake, my bad. Like, every time I've done that, it's ended well. It's like, okay, thanks for just owning up to it. You know, I think that's what most people want, is to just, for somebody to own up to a mistake, or to say they made a mistake, or to say, like, oh, sorry, I didn't get to this to you on time, or whatever. That's okay, cool. Thanks for owning up, you know. Yeah. Now we're on agreement that we're going to do better next time, sort of thing.
And I feel like with accountability, you shouldn't only hold yourself accountable, but change should also come with that, because accountability and an apology without change is essentially, to me, manipulation.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard it phrased that. It looks like you have some more thoughts. Say some more thoughts about that.
Yeah, because if you are to apologize to me and continue to act the way you are acting and expect me to just deal with it, you're manipulating me to allow this behavior to continue, and it's not okay.
I think something that might be close to what you're saying, a phrase is called lip service. Like, we're just giving you lip service. Like, Absolutely. We're just saying that, like, oh, I apologize, but then we're not backing it up with actions or change or changing the situation for better. So yeah, I agree, and that's super frustrating when that sort of stuff happens. Yeah. I mean, my experience has been that I kind of question, like, all right, again, like, how much more energy do I put into this relationship or trying to correct this, or do I now have to say, like, okay, it's better if we cut this off and I no longer give my time or energy to this situation or this person or whatever.
I mean, for me, if the situation becomes something of not changing and the manipulation continues, then personally, I don't have time for that. Yeah. Like, I will walk away from that, and it doesn't matter if I have to block you. It doesn't matter if I have to avoid you. I will not allow myself to be manipulated, and I'm glad I won't, because there are a lot of people in the world and a lot of people that I know personally that allow themselves to go through that, and I wonder why they do. But it is sad when I see that, because no one deserves to be manipulated at the end of the day.
Absolutely. As you said that, my mind was coming back to kind of like some of the places where we started the conversation of you and your goal to kind of be a voice for change and trying to help educate people. How do you draw that line? Because there is a line there, right? Like, I'm going to put forth my energy for change and my voice for change, but then we come against these barriers of people that obviously aren't going to change and are going to maybe harm us and try to manipulate us in the process. So how do you draw that line for yourself?
I draw the line by analyzing who is attempting to manipulate me, because if it is a close friend who knows about these story times of me being a dark-skinned Black woman in Utah, and they know the experiences I've gone through, and they end up hurting me in a way that they know will affect me negatively, I know that it is not worth my time to be friends with them anymore, because they already know what I've gone through, and if they can't respect that, then I just can't be around that. However, if it is a person I'm not close with, if it is a person that doesn't necessarily know my story or my background, then I will definitely try to educate them and continue to give them resources to, because sometimes they don't know Well, yeah, like I said, they don't know that what I've gone through, so they may not feel that they've attacked me, which leads back to the conversation of microaggressions, which is where I try to educate them.
If we were to try to put our finger on the pulse of Salt Lake and Utah and how we're doing around these topics and subjects and being able to have these sort of conversations and being able to hear from individuals like yourself, what's your thoughts? Where are we at? How are we doing?
I would say we aren't a really diverse state compared to like states such as New York or California. So that is something to, I'd say, not value, but it's something to take in, because compared to California or New York, I'd say Utah is doing poorly. And that is because the school I go to is a majority white school, so kids do very ignorant things a lot, and you see it all the time. And I know that if I were in California, it wouldn't only be me who's calling them out, but a lot more people who are calling them out, because California has more numbers and diversity than we do.
So in other words, would they learn quicker because there's more voices providing education, or?
I would say so.
Okay.
I would say so, because when you have more people, you have more personal stories from them, and sometimes you just need that, because then you're able to take it in better when you hear multiple stories being told instead of just my single story.
And probably to take it one step further than stories is relationship. Like if I'm friends with you and I get to know you over a period of time, I'm going to obviously become more sensitive to Elise and what she's been through and the experiences she shares with me. So if you're multiplying that with multiple friends from multiple backgrounds that are all telling you about their experience and be like, yo, Pete, this is not how it is. This is what my experience has been. I want you to understand that. And then I sit back and be like, oh, wow. I had no idea that you ever experienced that. And then we become a little bit more sensitive. So I think if we were to put that one step further to be able to listen to stories, which is a part of podcasting, why we're doing podcasts, so we can tell stories, it's the relationship, actually getting to know somebody, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say that you can tell when someone doesn't have much diversity in their life. Because there are kids at my own school where I just know that what they're saying is due to the fact that they don't have personal stories being told from different perspectives in their life and being told them constantly. And with people that do have that experience and people that do have those connections, they are usually better at taking accountability for their actions, where people who don't have that diversity tend to get defensive when you call them out.
I think I've noticed that as well. And obviously, going back to what you said earlier, the responsibility, the weight doesn't totally lie on people like yourselves or people are similar to you. We as a community, as a city, as a state, need to take some responsibility as well. So apart from this idea of we need to listen to each other's story, we need to be better at relationships with everybody, people that are different from us, what else do you think us as a community, us as a state can look at doing to try to better these sort of situations?
I would say uplifting the voices of marginalized groups and giving them the airtime to do so, which is why I even asked to be on the podcast in the first place. And having large media outlets in Utah covering the stories of people, and even just doing maybe small segments through like various medias would be great from different perspectives, because it would be more accessible and more people who don't have that diversity in their life can finally be able to hear it if they don't see it every day.
So the media maybe doing a little bit better job lifting up these voices, providing space for these voices, that sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know. So I'm becoming a little bit jaded with the media, especially mainstream media, because I think mainstream media just has a lot to do with politics and their own agenda. You know, they have what they want to get out there. Are you? Sounds like you maybe have noticed that, and I'm wondering if you've been able to find alternate sources of media that you feel are more authentic and real, where these voices can be authentically shared.
I would say through like Instagram.
Okay.
Because there are accounts for different Black student unions at different high schools, which do share events that people can go to learn more about the Black community within different high schools and within our community. So reaching out to different BSUs, asking if you can come to those events is a great way to finally learn about the diversity that you've been missing in your life.
How would one go about getting involved and participating in that? Because I'm just trying to think ahead and even think for me, if I were to, I'm not in college or school anymore, but if I were to approach and be like, hey, I want to come to your BSU event, would it just be as simple as that? Like I just need to reach out and make that effort? Or I don't know, do you have any other thoughts? Because I think I'm thinking that there might be some reluctance or discomfort, or like, oh, this feels a little bit weird for me.
I think just reaching out in the first place and giving the reason to the BSU as to why you would like to attend is just the first step and is the biggest step to make in order to be able to attend events like that.
Is there a BSU at your high school?
There is a BSU at my high school, and I'm glad there is.
And I'm kind of jumping to a conclusion that you participate?
I am very active in my BSU.
Okay. Again, me being somebody that hasn't been involved in that, help me understand, like, what does that look like? What are the goals of the BSU? Well, why do you do it? What do you hope from your school community?
Well, currently for my Black student union at my school, we are really trying to push for the opportunity and I'd say the right to sit down during the Pledge of Allegiance. And I know it's a little bit of a controversial topic, especially in a state like Utah. But since the second day of school, I've been in the dean's office going back and forth to administration as to why we should sit. And we've gotten a lot of, I'd say, pushback. But I'm going to continue to go into the dean's office until I'm able to sit for the pledge.
Okay. So right now they're not allowing you to sit for the pledge.
They are not, and it's extremely frustrating, especially for the words for justice for all, which there isn't justice for all.
Right.
And it's almost like a paradox because I understand that it is a goal, but like I said before, a goal or an apology without change is manipulation. And I feel like our country is sometimes manipulating us to believe this, especially in cases where there are victims of police brutality, sexual assault, hate crimes in general do not receive this justice. So where is justice for all? And if I don't see it in our country, if I don't see it in my own community, then why should I stand for it every single morning?
That's a great point. And I don't know if it's just your school or all schools do the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, but it is sort of a thing that, like, we just kind of go through this, we do this every morning. We're not really listening to the words or what they mean, and we're not really questioning them. So I really appreciate that a young person like yourself is trying to pose those questions. I think those questions need to be posed, and we need to ask ourselves that, and need to ask, okay, what can we do to create some change? And if it starts with, I don't know if you consider that a protest, to protest, like, we're not going to stand for this. I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, it is a great place to start, and because of my Black student union going to administration over the pledge, they've started a diversity committee at my school. And I mean, it's not necessarily what I wanted in the first place, but I do appreciate it because it allows us to speak over the topics and talk about and address the issues that go on in our school and how we can change them to benefit our school even after I leave and after I graduate.
Yeah, for sure. To create some longer lasting structures and systems that benefit people like yourself. And I imagine you want everybody to benefit in the future, right?
Absolutely.
I'm curious about these very first beginnings of Black Student Union at your school. Going back to August, the school year starts, you guys get together, you start forming the group. I assume this is kind of how it happens. And then you sit down and how do you decide, what are we going to focus on? What are we going to do this year?
Well, for our Black Student Union, I don't remember what we wanted to do at the beginning of the year was, but I definitely think it was about embracing our culture.
Okay.
Considering the fact that a lot of the Black students at our school are first-generation immigrants.
Okay.
And are people of color who would like to share what they know and who they are to our school without feeling judged. And then afterwards, with the pledge stuff starting, that's when it really became our focus, and that's when we knew what we really wanted to focus on this school year.
Okay. So the pledge kind of came, organically. Kind of like, okay, we need to address this right now.
Yeah, for me, it started because on the first day of school, I sat down because that is what we did all of last year. And a teacher called me out in front of the whole class. And it made me really uncomfortable because she made me seem like I absolutely hated America. I absolutely hated what this country has done for my parents. And then she said, go to the dean if you would like to address it. So then right after school, I walked myself to the dean's office, sat down, and talked about what I wanted, why I was uncomfortable in that situation, and why I wanted an explanation as to why this new policy was input, because it makes my school seem performative in a sense. Because I was a freshman last year, and during that summer is when the death of George Floyd occurred. Mm-hmm. So I believe our school only let us sit to show that they were quote-unquote woke and knew what was going on over the summer. So then now that they removed us this right to be able to sit down for 15 seconds during the day, it just shows, and it makes you wonder, did you actually care about what happened during that summer? Did you actually care about the Black Lives Matter movement? And do you actually know that it is still active and wasn't just a trend over that summer?
I'm sure you've noticed this, but a lot of things that a lot of people do are very performative.
Absolutely.
Which is frustrating, very frustrating. So over the course of these months, you're kind of protesting with the dean. You're trying to get the whole school to see from your perspective a little bit, learn, get some education. Any progress?
I would say so. But the issue is my school, it's a private institution. So they basically told us that they can make us do whatever they want. And that is almost a literal direct quote from an administrator's mouth. And it's upsetting because I have friends who go to public school. They're able to sit down, do what they need to do, and not get in trouble for it or face any repercussions or disrespect for it. But as soon as I do it, because I do go to a private institution, I do get reprimanded, and it's annoying.
Besides,
what can I say?
Yeah, besides this like excuse of we're a private school, we can do what we want. Are there any like other discussions of like, oh, Elise, we understand where you're coming from, or it's kind of nothing? It's just kind of like we're a private school, we do what we want?
No, we're still going at it.
Okay, so there's still ongoing.
Recently, we found out that it was our superintendent who opposed this rule. So we decided that we're going to have an assembly during Black History Month. Actually during January, around that time.
Okay.
And we are attempting to invite the superintendent and his boss to the assembly to hear where we're coming from as a BSU, to hear about our personal experiences, like I said, because personal experiences are always the best way to create change and correct people. So hopefully, in addition to that, we are also attempting to draft up a little sum for the superintendent to read. So
No, I like that. I like this very active process. It takes a lot as a young person to want to put your voice and effort and emotion into some of these things. And I guess on one hand, I kind of feel bad that you have to address these things when you should just be enjoying going out on the weekend and listening to Afro beats or whatever, you know. But on the other hand, I really appreciate that a young person is willing to stand up and use their voice and their energy and their emotion to do this kind of stuff.
I would definitely say I'm not grateful for the experience, like I said, with COVID, but like I'm grateful that I get to learn about this at a young age, and I'm grateful that I get to be active in my community at a young age. And even though it takes a lot of patience to deal with administration and to deal with going and running in circles, I would say it's going to be worth it in the end, especially when I get to be able to sit during the pledge, because I think that it is achievable.
Absolutely. And it's a weird thing that there's even these questions on whether you should be able to sit for the pledge, because the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States is all about freedom and being able to exercise your freedom. Exactly. So if you want to sit down and you want to support the Constitution or the Pledge of Allegiance or the flag because you have some grievances, some complaints, some bad feelings about it, I'm like, well, let's let you do that, you know.
Exactly.
Like it's such a funny thing, and I think a lot of it does go back to this performative, like, sort of, we're this private institution, this is what we stand for, so we're going to be very performative this way, or this wokeness, like we're going to be woke in this sort of way but not this sort of way. It's a weird sort of dynamic that I've kind of been noticing lately.
I'd say that dynamic is very frustrating, and it makes you seem neglected in your own school building. And at school, you should be able to feel comfortable in that space, because you have to be there for 8 hours, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And if you are not comfortable, you're not going to be able to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say when I'm not able to sit down for the pledge, when I'm getting called out by a teacher in front of my entire classroom, it makes me uncomfortable. And for the rest of the day, I was very mad and I wasn't happy during the day. Like, it ruined my whole 8 hours and beyond that.
I'm curious, did the teacher ever come back and address that with you, or try to like figure out what was going on, or talk to you, or have a classroom discussion about this sort of thing, or anything like that?
No. And this teacher, no shade to the teacher, but I'd say this teacher, they're fairly problematic in a sense, because they'll say things such as, you know, sitting down is not protesting. Real protesting is marching in the streets. It's 8 a.m. and it's only for 15 seconds. And as soon as I go out the building to start marching down the street, the pledge will already be over. So just let me sit down for the 15 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to throw shade, I will. You know, shade towards the teacher. Like, give even just a 5-minute classroom discussion about it. Like, let's address it. Why not talk about it? I don't know, obviously, but I'm sure peers and friends are supportive of you.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, and I am very glad they are, because without that support system, I probably would have given up by now, considering the fact that I did start on the second day of school, and it is now December, and I'm still working on it. And without that support, like I said, I probably would have already stopped.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that there's some progress there, and that you're able to have those sort of discussions, and that the assembly really is something that can help educate, it seems like, those that are in those higher level positions that need probably a little bit more education about all of this.
And I definitely think that it'll be beneficial, and I know it will, and do not hope it does or / will, if you understand what I'm saying. Uh-huh. I do believe in the assembly, because the kids at my school, it's not only faculty and administration. There are kids that do need to be called out. There are kids that do need to recenter and revise themselves, because even on my first day of school last year, it was my very first day. I was not even in the building for 30 minutes. I heard a George Floyd joke right behind me. So it just sets you up for like what the next 4 years are going to be like. And that's what I expect from my classmates, for them to be ignorant. because of that very first joke on the very first day within my first 30 minutes of being within the building.
Yeah, that's sad. That says something, that out of the number of people who are in the building and you're hearing that probably means it's being said a lot more. It wasn't just like this one-off chance. It probably means that that's happening more. Are people that are not black or from that background, are there people in your school that are also trying to advocate, also trying to help?
Yeah, absolutely. There are my own friends, and there are teachers that are really going for us, even though their bosses may not agree with it, and I am really grateful for them. Like the history teacher I mentioned before, they're really supportive of my work, and they encourage me to continue to fight for what my right is.
Yeah, you have a right to express your opinion and to share with everybody else why you have that opinion, just like anybody else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I was being dismissed, and I still feel like the black students and the people of color at my school are still being dismissed. And the pledge issue really demonstrated that, and it opened my eyes to what I should expect from the world almost, which sounds sad, but I mean, I already have this expectation from my own experiences before going to high school, and it continues to add on to these expectations. But I know at the end of the day that if I am within myself and continue to have that self-love, then I'll be able to continue on.
I think that's where it should start for all of us, is that self-love and that confidence and that self-esteem in ourselves that we can do this, we're going to do this, let's go out and put the energy towards it. So I appreciate your words and your young wisdom on that. You know,
Thank you.
Most people say wisdom comes with age, but you're getting it at an early age, which is great. So we've talked a lot about school and the education system, and we're kind of talking about how can we do these things better as a community. Maybe let's focus a second on the education system. Besides these things that you're mentioning about kind of these structures that we have of like, we're saying the Pledge of Allegiance and everybody needs to agree to exactly what that says.
Yeah.
Like, what other things in the education system have you noticed that we need to be better at? And it doesn't necessarily have to be surrounding the race and that sort of topic, but if there are things, let's definitely I want to hear it.
I think there are things regarding race that I've noticed specifically
Yeah,
in Utah.
for sure. I want to hear about it.
In like communities that are heavily carried by people of color, there are poorer schools and they have less resources, whereas schools that have a majority white population, they do have better education, they do have better SAT scores, and it's because that they are given those resources. And I'm not going to say it's because of race necessarily, but it just looks suspicious at times, because at schools like Granger, which have some of the worst SAT scores and ACT scores in Utah, it has a majority people of color rate, while as schools such as Skyline, for example, has a majority white population. They do have better opportunities. They do have better scores than them. And it just looks weird when you look at the numbers and when you process it.
Yeah, these disparities in graduation rates. There's tons of disparities that go into the juvenile justice system, which that could be a whole nother topic for another day. But going back to this educational sort of stuff, so if you're one thing that you're noticing or you're saying is that there seems to be more resources going to schools that have a majority white population versus more diverse schools.
Absolutely.
So a change or something that we could work on as a state or a community, a city, could be how do we better divide our resources to everybody that needs it, and probably need to acknowledge that it doesn't or shouldn't be necessarily an equal division. It should be like, we definitely notice that there's more resources that are needed here. Let's put them there.
if you realize that something needs more resources, then just give it to them. For example, if you're in a garden and you're watering flowers, you're not going to overfill the flower that is already blooming when there's a seed right there that obviously needs the water.
Well put. Great metaphor. Besides resources, what other things have you noticed?
In regards to mental health, I would say schools, they need to chill a little bit.
Okay.
They need to chill a little bit because at the end of the day, we are kids and we do need that time to reassess. We do need that time to be able to calm down. And school recently, I'd say in like recent times, it's so stressful and there's so many people focusing, I'm one of the people, focusing on like grades, test scores, colleges, and applications. And I started doing my research for that since I was in 6th grade.
Wow.
So school, it puts too much pressure on kids because I had my college list ready since 6th grade and it's still the same in my phone.
Uh-huh.
So it just shows that, like with my own example, that we worry about it too much and at too of an early age.
Okay. So taking some of the pressure off of like, you need to go to college, you need to get a good ACT score, and maybe just letting these elementary age kids be and, you know, get the basic foundations of their education along with the social aspects of an education as well.
And education is important, but it shouldn't be important to the point where you aren't sleeping over it. It shouldn't be important to the point where you're having panic attacks over it, depressive episodes over it, because at the end of the day, your life matters more than a test score.
And would you say that part of this needs to be then that our education system includes doing a better job assessing these mental health aspects that go with it? Because like I never was asked of like, Pete, are you feeling depressed? Because I noticed that you experiencing a mental health related, because I noticed you failed your last test or anything like that. I don't know. What are your ideas on like how schools, the education system could better address this? Like, okay, we need to chill out. We need to provide better support for mental health, that sort of stuff.
I would say teachers should always ask their students how they're doing and what they need, because my history teacher, I really love this teacher.
Yes.
They asked us one time during a very stressful week, and they said, what do you need from me? What do you feel is appropriate for a test? And we got to choose as a class what kind of test we wanted. So instead of having a traditional written test, because this is an AP class, we got to do a test where we had an open dialogue and they'd ask us questions like we are doing right now. And we got to lead the conversation rather than them choosing the exact topics that we need to focus on. And it was very beneficial to the class, and I feel as if less people stressed out over it than we did for regular tests.
Yeah, there is this interesting thing with tests and the education system where we think that the best way to test somebody is this written test where like you have to multiple choice or whatever it looks like, and there isn't room for like this oral conversation where you can demonstrate, like me just sitting across from you right now, you're obviously demonstrating that you're a very intelligent person.
Thank you.
And if your teacher takes the same time to do that and they're maybe more focused on a particular topic, history or whatever, they can know whether you're grasping the subject and grasping the things that are being covered in the class. They don't necessarily need to put that on paper.
Yeah, because not everyone is good at written tests. Not everyone is able to study in that manner. And I feel as if teachers should vary tests across the year and see, depending on like the class period, what test is best for each period, whether it's open dialogue for one or written for another. That would be very beneficial and allow students to realize what their strengths are and what they might need to focus on in the future. Does
your school also have like any specific mental health resources, like a counselor or a social worker, or anybody there that you can go to and be like, okay, I am having an anxious episode, can you help me out?
We do have counselors, but talking to like people like my friends and other students, we don't really go to them. And we feel as if because they're going to take it too seriously, because there are some people that just need that break during the day, and the counselors may end up calling home and making it a huge thing. I mean, there have been times where people have gotten whole CPS cases because they've gone to the counselor because they were stressed. So sometimes they care a little too much.
Got you. Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, CPS is Child Protective Services. So, yeah, so this ability by the counselor or those that are attending to mental health to be able to assess and know where somebody is at and what the appropriate level of action is.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big skill, I would say, and not everybody has it. And I think, again, it just goes to this need of, like, let's compensate people that want to help with mental health in appropriate ways, and that's money compensation, but let's also incentivize people to go into mental health because it's a needed thing, and we'll have better and better people be mental health professionals in our schools and our communities, and over time it's really going to help us all out.
And I feel like if you are a counselor, do your own research because you may have like a degree in it, but it's always best to just do your own research. And if a kid comes to you, always try your best to get the most information out of them without scaring them or like without pushing them to their limits, of course, to be able to assess the situation properly, whether they do need CPS to be called or they just need a break during the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking that time to really get to know the situation for the individual is such a huge thing. And a previous guest that I had on put out his episode last week, Sean Seastrand. He's an educator, and he talked a lot about the need to connect with the students on a more emotional, social level rather than just an educator. He happens to be a history teacher as well, but he's always just preaching like, we're there for the students. We need to be there for them and have a relationship with them. It's not about just me trying to cram facts about in 1952 or whatever it is. It's all about having a relationship, and when that relationship and that connection is felt, that other education piece and the ability to learn those things in the class all becomes easier and better.
I would definitely say that. Like in my history class, I don't feel pressure towards it, and I don't feel like it puts pressure on me, even though it is a hard class, because of how caring the teacher is, because of the environment that they provide to us. And I'm grateful for that, because in past classes I have and classes I have right now, it isn't like that in the classroom. And I feel like all teachers should be able to have that connection with students, because it will improve test scores. It will improve, AP score rates. And if that's what they care about, then they should focus on that.
It sounds like, I'm just taking a guess, that this teacher, they probably don't necessarily care so much about the test scores. They probably care more about you and the other students there.
I would say they care about the test scores, but they also do really care for us. And it's seen, and it hasn't even been the end of the semester yet, but I do know that in the future, even when I leave this class, I'll be able to come back into that classroom and be welcomed and be able to talk about what I need to talk about without any judgment.
As you describe teachers and what you would hope out of a teacher, I'm curious, a lot of this seems coming down to like personality factors. This person's personality is really good. I connect with them. So do you think it's something that teachers can develop over time to, maybe they don't necessarily need to adjust their personality or who they are, they can be who they are, but what sort of skills are involved in being able to do that?
I mean, with any teacher, you have to be personable. Because there are some classes where I just know I will never be able to talk to this teacher outside of the classroom if I'm not in a lesson. And it makes me uncomfortable to be in that classroom and I'm only there to learn. When in reality, school, I'm there for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I should be able to feel comfortable. And I think teachers, if you may have a standoffish personality, just really try to be warm with kids, because at the end of the day, like I said, we are kids, and we need that connection in order to succeed. Yeah.
I'm really glad. And it's a great reminder for me. I mentioned to you before we started recording that, I help run after-school programs, and I'll be honest, there's times that I struggle with that. I really try to like be personable and connect with students, but there's other times where I get overwhelmed. I'm dealing with 20 kids, and 5 of them are trying to make my life very difficult, you know.
And I think one thing that helps would be doing like fact cards or Google Forms, because in 2 of my classes that I do really feel comfortable in, we did that where we wrote facts about ourselves and what we may need from a teacher. So people could have written down that they struggle with certain things, and the teacher would be able to adjust with that by pulling out the note card and being able to know this student struggles with this, so I need to approach them in this manner.
Oh, wow. That's a great suggestion. I might, after we finish recording, I might have to get you to send me what one of those looks like. And I might have to steal that idea and use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Moving on from education and maybe broader community, any thoughts or ideas that you have as Salt Lake City, as the main city here in Utah, and then the state of Utah? What's our future? How do we be better surrounding all these topics and issues that we've been discussing today?
Well, I'd say Salt Lake, compared to the rest of Utah, we are a progressive city. And as for Utah, I've seen so many more people come in from various backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and just personality-wise. So I'd say just to accept those people, make sure that they feel welcomed here, learn about them, and don't be standoffish. Get personable, like I said, with the teachers, because at the end of the day, that will benefit our community more than harm it always.
So just like having this attitude, somebody new in my community, I need to get over my discomfort on approaching them and befriending them, and just go for it. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to have that sort of, this is my own way of dealing with new things, is this question of like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I try to really take myself to this worst place of like, what do I really think is going to be the harm in me approaching somebody new? And I sit with that for a second, and I get over the anxiety that goes with those thoughts, and then usually I'm able to go and do it because I just like, I'm over it now. I've gone through the kind of thought process needed for it.
Because like you said, no one's going to like slap you if you come up and like ask them where are they from, and do it in a respectful manner, of course. Don't go, where are you really from?
Right.
Because that goes back to microaggressions.
Right.
So I'd say think about how you want to approach them and then just go for it.
Yeah, and I had another friend that we talked about this question of where you are from and how to ask it, and I think that those are some beautiful remarks that you shared. Is because sometimes when we ask it in certain ways, we are creating this other situation where we're immediately putting you in another, a separate group because you're from somewhere else. Where if you kind of approach this "where are you from" topic as like, I want to learn about you and your background and what makes you go, I think it's a different approach, and at least that's how my frame of thinking is around it. Maybe you could share some more thoughts about where you're coming from on it.
I would say to ask and to know where someone is from, and if you want to know their cultural background, just simply ask, hey, like, what is your cultural background? Because that's the easiest way to do it without becoming disrespectful. And that person would probably gladly share it, because a lot of people are proud of where they come from, and they aren't often asked this a lot in Utah, from my own experience, without it seeming mean or judgmental. So if you just ask that, they'll gladly open up, and they'll gladly put you on things like music, such as Afrobeats and food and
culture and all that. Yeah, my experience has been that like if I approach it in a way of like being genuinely curious, and even using these words like I'm just really honestly curious about kind of like your culture, your background, and like I've heard about these things, I don't know what's real, what's not, I want to hear from you, because it's just a curiosity, a learning thing for me, and I'm always interested in people. I want to get to know people as well. I feel like, that sort of approach is obviously, been a little bit more comfortable for me. And yeah, I appreciate your insight about those sort of things as well. Yeah. So on a community level, first thing is to be like more open and willing to approach people that are new or different from us, or that we recognized, oh, like these people moved into the apartment next to me or to the house down from the street from me. How can I go befriend them? Besides those sort of things, any other thoughts on community, state level things that we can do better at?
I would say in our community and state, we need more people that look like marginalized groups. And I would say this is for America too, but especially in Utah, we need more people that look like me. We need more people that look like people who feel that they aren't being represented, because it helps them become more comfortable in themselves. And I feel as if I had more people that looked like me in the media when I was younger, I would have overcame those insecurities much faster and be able to be given self-love by myself at a much earlier age.
So people in leadership positions and just general teacher, educator, hospital nurse, all these positions, we just need a better diversity in community in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. I'm curious and want to know your thoughts or experiencing surrounding religion. Religion's a huge part of Utah. Obviously, the predominant religion is Mormonism, the Church of Jesus Christ, and they have a lot of influence on how things happen here in the state and the city. What's your experience been? And pull that microphone a little bit closer.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right. We want to make sure that your voice is loud and clear. So, yeah, what's your experience been?
My experience with Mormonism, well, I am a Catholic.
Okay.
And I don't have an issue with Mormons. And I'm glad that Utah is becoming more diverse, because we do have more religions now instead of just Mormonism and Catholicism. Now we have Islam coming into becoming more of a bigger thing in Utah, and having more hijabis being seen throughout our state, as well as religions such as Buddhism I've seen recently. So it just overall diversity is always a beneficial factor to the community in all ways, and religion, always respect someone's religion. Religion is something, it is a cultural thing a lot of the time, and never disrespect someone's culture. Always respect it, and if you don't understand it and if you want to learn more about it, you have the resources to, such as the internet, and you have people around you now in a more diverse Utah around you to be able to ask those questions if you are curious.
My experience from religion, so I grew up Mormon. I no longer would consider myself Mormon or follow that religious thought or ideology, but my experience has kind of been that religion in some senses creates these boundaries between each other, because back when in my Mormon days, if I saw you as a Catholic and I'm Mormon, I'm like, oh man, I want Elise to be a Mormon. like that would kind of be my thought process around it. So it would be kind of this already creating this other, like, these thoughts about, like, okay, it would be real cool, like, I get that you're Muslim, but it'd be real cool if we all become Catholic or whatever sort of thing. So I'm just curious about your thoughts, or if you've actually thought about it that way, or if that was my warped way of thinking about things from my youth growing up Mormon.
Though I understand what you're saying, because religion is used a lot of the time to defend ignorance. Mm-hmm. And when you see someone that is of a different religion than you, or a religion that you don't necessarily respect or that you have never been exposed to, you find it as an excuse to be able to dismiss them. And like I said before, respect all religions, respect all cultures. And you shouldn't use your own faith to be able to be mean and disrespectful towards anybody.
Yeah, I like that. And I would say for the most part, a lot of people do a good job of kind of this respect, but there is these sort of like divides surrounding religion where we do group ourselves and we're more comfortable, hanging out with other people that are Catholic or other people that are Mormon or Muslim or whatever. So it feels like we're doing a little bit better, and there's been a little bit more ability for us to kind of mix together and be with each other. I don't know if that's just my feeling, if you felt that as well.
I've definitely been able to feel that, considering the fact that I've had friends who are hijabis that they used to feel uncomfortable wearing the hijab and chose not to go to school, but now they do wear it often, and I'm glad that they are able to practice their religion without feeling necessarily embarrassed or judged by other people because of it.
Yeah, I think that can be an extra challenge with particular religions, like, wearing something outwardly that shows that you're a part of religion, because then that gives somebody an immediately visual thing to either probably be uncomfortable about or to judge you about or to create some sort of discrimination about. So I would say that those sort of things definitely have been present, and I'm glad to hear that there is seemingly becoming more comfort. I agree. I think that there's been a better job done even by the Mormon Church of being more inclusive in the community, even though they represent the lion's share of membership and power when it comes to that sort of aspect of our community.
Yeah, and I am very happy with the progress that the Mormon community has made, because I know around like the history of Mormonism that there were things such as racism becoming a common occurrence, such as denying people of color who would like to participate in the faith. But now I have some of my uncles and some of my family members who are Mormon and are actively participating in the church.
Yeah, they're certainly making advances and being better about talking about that. I mean, me as a former participant, I think there's still obviously a lot of room to grow and a lot of things that they could do better at. And again, I hope this sort of conversation is helping those, in just the general community. Not saying that I expect the prophet of the church to hear this and Pete and Elise talked. They got some good suggestions. But just in general, this idea okay, we need to talk about these sort of things so that we can become better at first talking about them, and then as we talk about them, we'll deal with the issues that come along with it.
Yeah, because once a subject is brought up, if it makes you uncomfortable, you're going to have to get past that barrier, of course, but don't stop because of it. Try to overcome it and continue the conversation, because conversations are the first step and are the largest step in order to produce change. And these conversations are necessary to have in our community, especially in Utah, which is growing in diversity. And in order to welcome that diversity with open arms, these conversations need to be held so people aren't scared and so people don't have those assumptions beforehand.
Well said. For you, is there any responsibility for, with the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is there a responsibility there because they do have large membership here in Utah, a lot of the power? Is there a responsibility for them to do more in the community?
I believe so, because if you are a leading member in Utah, if you are a leading group in Utah, then that means you do have the power to produce change. And once you start holding those conversations, other groups that are influential will begin to start having those conversations as well. And it produces a butterfly effect, which allows one group one by one to start speaking about it. And once you all start speaking about it, you're able to pinpoint certain issues on certain topics and are able to produce a change for it that is beneficial and that will help other people feel comfortable in Utah and in our communities.
Another question that I kind of, and I apologize because I don't know the best words to ask this question, so I might kind of stumble through it. But you mentioned this, going back to the Mormon Church and the responsibility and the growth that needs to happen. Going back to this topic that you said, they have had a racist past and had kind of denied people who are black from participating in the faith, but maybe have advanced that they're overcoming that racist part. I would say, and I haven't experienced this racism myself, I would say that they need to do a better job of kind of apologizing and acknowledging those parts of their history. There's kind of like, we're progressing and we're allowing black people to participate, but there's not this like, we acknowledge that we were racist and we want to apologize. What do we need to do? And I don't expect you to be able to speak for, all black people, of course, but I'm just trying to kind of get a different perspective on this sort of topic. Like, what would your perspective be about these historical things where perceivably they're trying to do better about racism within the church? How can they acknowledge that past racism and move forward?
I think to acknowledge it I wouldn't say throw money at the problem.
Okay.
But
it never hurts.
In communities where there are people of color and they are not being taken seriously and they aren't given the resources, provide those resources to them to show that you actually care about them now. And you can accept people into the church, but are you really helping them feel welcomed? Are you asking them about where they come from culturally and their own personal stories? And once you're able to start those conversations and once you're able to provide resources to those marginalized communities that you once denied, it'll feel as if, well, I'm not speaking for the whole black community, like you said.
We don't want you to have to feel that way. And I genuinely just kind of want your own individual perspective on it.
In my eyes, I'd probably feel as if they actually care now and they actually want to acknowledge what they did and make change and be active in this change. Yeah.
I appreciate you entertaining that question, not being, somebody of the Mormon faith and, not trying to get you to answer a question on behalf of black people. But I think that situation probably has lots of applications because we're a historically racist country, right? So like there's racism intertwined in lots of things that we've done in our past. So how can we do that as, a religion, a community, a state, a nation? How can we properly go back, acknowledge the racism, and then do things to actively change and be better? So I appreciate that, and I hope that provides like a caveat for our community because Mormonism has such a big influence in our community. Yeah. We've covered a lot of good stuff tonight.
Glad we have.
Yeah, obviously I've led a lot of the discussion, but I'm curious in our final minutes before we wrap up if there are other areas that you're feeling passionate about or that we didn't touch on that you want to talk about or experiences or anything like that.
I really am passionate about making change in my school because I do have to still go to that school until I graduate, and my sibling will probably also go to said school. So I would like to promote change in my community, and I would like to encourage others who hear this and who are in high school to promote the change and tackle the issues that they see, whether they have to talk to administration, whether they have to talk to people around them, because once you start promoting it, the conversation will start and the ripple chain will begin.
I love that. And I appreciate that we're able to have this conversation without, we talked about this a little bit when we very first talked about you coming on the podcast, is having these conversations without necessarily trying to point fingers or to call people out publicly, because we want to do these things in a sensitive way or in a way that, like you're having these conversations with the dean and hopefully the superintendent. So you're there. They're acknowledging what the situation is. Maybe there will be a point where publicly and community level we will have to call people out and have this on a bigger conversation. But I think people that hear this and know you and know the school, of course, will know the situation. And I hope that will create some action within that sphere of your life and that part of your community. And I hope that we can do these sort of things in a way where we're, not, I don't know what the best way to say it, like, not just spitting fire at people for the way that they are or our perceptions or whatever it is,
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I always think about how I'm going to approach the situation each time I go into the dean's office with a new update or with something new that I want to approach with him. And I have to take that in mind because I don't want anybody on the administration or faculty to become defensive, which will make them shut down and ignore what I say, which is why I always try to go in, be a little positive about it. Don't try to become negative or angry. And I feel like it has been helpful, even though in situations I do believe that I have the right to be angry, but I try my best not to lash out in the office because at the end of the day, I really need this to go through, and I really need this to become something that is granted to the student body.
And anger is just an emotion, and we all experience it. So I think it's absolutely right for you to be able to show your anger. And just by sitting across from you for this couple hours so far, I think that you're probably doing a pretty good job of expressing that anger in an appropriate way. I think it's a lesson that we all could learn better, is just like when we have these certain strong emotions, how do we express them, right?
Yeah.
And it's okay to express them because they're emotions. And that goes back to this mental health theme as well, is like mental health is about experiencing the spectrum of emotions. We got them on both sides. In extreme excitement and happiness, how do we express that appropriately? In extreme sadness, loneliness, how do we express that appropriately? Or anger or whatever it might be, is learning that. So I appreciate your acknowledgement and your willingness to kind of do that dance, to play on words, like that dance, to be able to like figure out, okay, how am I going to approach this today in a way where I can show them that I'm frustrated and angry with the way that they're doing it, but in a way that will promote change and not promote defensiveness. Because as soon as you put somebody on the defensive, you're right, they're going to shut down and the conversation's probably not going to go the place it needs to. If people did want to reach out to you, really like what you're saying, would like to have a conversation like we're having, or invite you to have a conversation, or just in general, do you want people to reach out and get in contact with you?
I am always open to reaching out because, like I said, I want the conversation to continue, and not just within my school, but if I'm able to spark conversations at other schools and within different communities, it'll be beneficial to all of us.
Absolutely. And maybe this just popped in my head as you said that maybe this is kind of like a start for you to connect with students in a similar situations in other schools, where once a month or once every few months, once every other month, you guys got together as community members and said like, all right, this is how I'm approaching it at my school and I'm finding a lot of success. What's going on at your school? And you guys can really collaborate and start to really make some change that way.
I would definitely like that. And there are schools such as the East High BSU that has collaborated with my high school's BSU, and it always creates, I'd say, a great connection, and it makes you realize that there are people outside of your school facing the same thing, and that there are always people to talk to if you get necessarily tired of going to the same people or want new perspectives and opinions.
Definitely. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you? I mean, we probably don't want to give your phone number out on a podcast. I don't know and with every podcast, we include some notes with every episode, so we could put an email or a social media or whatever you prefer.
I'll link my social medias then.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll put all the social media for Elise in the notes for this episode, so if you want to reach out to her, just check out those notes and you'll see a way to do that. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to reach out. It's again, like I said at the beginning, it's like a bold, courageous, awesome thing for you to just be able to reach out to some random guy like me that you don't know and be like, hey, I want to be on your podcast because I heard this other podcast and I think it's a great conversation. So I really appreciate you being willing to do that.
And I really appreciate you for having me and giving me the platform to speak about the issues that are going on in our community, that are going on throughout our state, that need to be addressed and that need to be approached properly.
And I hope that, in, 6 months or 8 months or a year, we have another episode and we invite you back. We see what the progress is. And obviously, I think there's a lot more areas about life and maybe less serious things that we can explore as well.
I'd enjoy that. I'd really like that.
Cool. Any other final thoughts or things before we wrap up?
I would like to say start listening to Afrobeats. when we're
Okay.
listening.
No, I like that too.
I just have to put a little plug in before I stop recording. But
P Square.
P Square.
Start with P Square.
P Square. You start
and
with
then
P Square,
Go
and
from
then you
there.
go from there.
Okay. P Square. I'm curious. There's got to be music videos with.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it seems like to get the full experience, P Square with some music video would
Absolutely.
probably be a great place to start. It looks like I know what I'm doing tonight.
I'm glad you know.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.